Hi Matthew.
Hi.
You are Head of Disputes and Litigation here at EMG. Would you tell me a little bit about the work that you do? I guess the best place to start is, what is a dispute in litigation?
Yeah. So I always think about the phrase civil litigation as being a little bit old-fashioned. More commonly these days we talk about dispute resolution, but the best way I can describe what I do is problem solving.
Yeah, good one. And in terms of problem solving, what are some of the most common problems or disputes that you solve?
Yeah. A dispute usually comes out of something that's changed. So it can be a death, which leads to a dispute, for example, about a will or the estate, that is the money and property in the estate, or a change in a relationship. So that can be a personal relationship between family members, or an unmarried couple splitting up, or a change in a commercial relationship that then leads to a dispute.
I guess I didn't think about it that way. I straight thought about just personal, but I guess, business is really
business,
important.
neighbours as well, of course, not just families.
Arguing over the fence.
All of that, especially over the fence.
Especially
boundaries, fence disputes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and what about some of the more unusual ones? Have you got any examples for us?
Yeah, so I've had a case in recent years concerning a dispute over a pet. So that was, again, coming out of a breakdown in a relationship between an unmarried couple who owned a pet jointly. And that dispute went all the way to a trial. Along the way, there were not one, but two kidnappings of said pet, yes.
Wow.
But actually, in the end, it settled on the day of the trial. And then we've also had two disputes concerning the ashes of a deceased person.
Okay.
So the first one concerned a memorial tattoo. So one of the family members wanted to use some of the deceased ashes to make a tattoo in memory of the deceased family member, the father, grandfather. And then in the other case, it was a dispute, again, as I say, about the deceased ashes, where another family member, this is a different dispute, not the same family, I hasten to add, where one of the family members wanted to use some of the ashes to make some jewellery.
Okay.
In each case, other family members were vehemently opposed to the memorial tattoo and the jewellery. And those cases led to disputes, the first of which, the tattoo, that was settled in the end. The jewellery, that did go to court and was eventually decided by a judge.
That is so interesting, and it sounds like no day is ever the same. I mean, no dispute is ever the same for you.
Yeah, big variety of things. It surprises me what people are prepared to argue over. But behind it, as I say, is always something else. I think some kind of change or breakdown in a relationship. So it's not necessarily always about the tattoo or the pet. It's about something else behind that a solicitor will struggle to solve. But that's,
maybe a counsellor instead.
Yeah, quite possibly.
And I guess for people listening especially, is there a right time to seek your professional advice? I think most of us, or I speak for myself, you try and get on with it, and then things probably reach a crisis point. Is that when you think is the right time to get in touch, or?
It's a really difficult question to answer. So there's any number of things I could say. I do think that as a lawyer who deals with disputes, I have a jaundiced view of what happens in the real world, that actually most people are able to resolve the tensions and disputes in a personal or business relationship. I still do think that that's the best thing to do, to try and resolve the issue yourself as informally as possible, without sending emails or letters or whatever. But at a fairly early stage, it's a good idea to take advice. So I often have people coming to me for advice who describe a situation that is getting worse, maybe slowly or maybe quite quickly. Yeah. And what I often say is that it's actually best not for me to become directly involved straight away, because that can work well, but it can work badly. You can up the ante as soon as someone receives a letter or an email with solicitors.
Emotions.
It can actually make the dispute worse. So going back to what I said at the start about a lot of what I do being problem solving, it isn't about me telling you, as the person who's come for advice, what to do, but it's about me presenting some options, saying what I think are the better or the worse options, and us working out together what the best way is to resolve the dispute. So at a fairly early stage, once things have escalated to a point where actually things are very acrimonious,
communication's broken down.
it can be difficult to bring that back. So come for advice, I would say to people at a fairly early stage, and we'll work out together how best to calm the situation down. The very last thing we would ever do is say to someone, right, we're off to court. Sometimes you don't have any choice. That's the only option you've got left. But usually it's best to resolve matters with a settlement. So resolving things in a way that everyone's content with and enables everyone to move on, get on with their lives again.
And that's interesting. That was the last question I was going to ask you about the process. So if you were advising people listening about the process, if they've never been through anything like this before, or they've got something going on in their life, maybe it is a change in a relationship or with work, for example, what would you say people's initial best step would be? Would get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. To take advice, absolutely, we'll have a chat.
Yeah.
And then the next stage would be sending quite possibly a fairly low-key letter. And then there's guidance from the courts, which we would be expected to follow. That is to send, if we're bringing the claim, if that's what we've decided to do, to send what's called a letter of claim. So it's a fairly formal, lengthy letter. But again, we're not going to court yet. And then the other side have an opportunity to respond with what's called a letter of response. And then after that, the courts strongly recommend that the parties try to get together to settle a dispute without exactly a mediation or a settlement meeting or a negotiation. There's any number of ways we could do that to try and resolve things without involving the court, because going to court is horrendously expensive, or can be, and you're never quite sure how it's going to turn out.
And can it take a long time? So can these things last a year, 2 years, more?
Yeah, a year or 2 years is typical. Yeah, so there are delays in the civil courts at the moment, and have been for a number of years, made worse by COVID. A case could easily take up to 2 years to get to trial. It's a long time. It's a long time to have the stress of a dispute that is you have to keep thinking about.
Yes.
And it's much better to get it resolved at an early stage if you can.
And I suppose finishing on a light note, then thinking about that stress, what do you like about what you do? What is it that drives?
I like the variety of work. So it's stimulates my brain, but also it is, as I said, going back to that phrase about problem solving. So helping people and working cooperatively with people, working with my clients to resolve difficult situations in a way that enables them to move on.
Okay. And will you be getting any memorial tattoos?
No, I will
anytime
not.
soon?
No chance.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely to find out what you do.
Yeah, thank you.